fellow, and his hair was darker. And I came to know just from little snippets of conversation that I'd heard from other people that he was very regarded by Dr. Peter Masters, the pastor of the Metropolitan Tabernacle, that he had been at the Tabernacle and had gone to Plymouth to start a church. And if I understand correctly, the way you laid the ground,
I called David, and because if you know that chorus, as it gets towards the end, David slings a stone, and one little stone went up, 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 and the giant came tumbling down. And we used to stand on the chairs, as the stone went up, up, up. I don't know if you do this here. We didn't have a carpet on the floor, and therefore, as the giant came tumbling down, everyone would jump as high as they could in the air to make the maximum impact on landing on the floor. Perhaps I can refer to that, and perhaps in Luke chapter 5. Just a little bit about my wife and myself. We met at London. In London, to be in the same church. So our knowledge of and he has said, and I've heard him say this, that if he had his time again, he would begin his church planting work with Sunday school work, because the advantages of Sunday school work are so many. And so what I think I'm here to do this evening anyway is speak a little bit about Sunday school work, to try and be as encouraging as possible, and to say that it may not be that the Lord will grant us the fruitfulness that we would love to have, but we are guaranteed, I would suggest on the basis of Scripture, fruitfulness, and we are guaranteed souls for our hire. And I would like us to demonstrate that if necessary and prove it. But let me just thank you again for being here. Without further ado, I'll keep an eye on the clock at the back there. I'd love to think there'll be loads of questions and answers. There'll be loads of questions, there may be some answers, and that's the way to learn, isn't it? So I wouldn't say we're here because we know how to do this. We're here because we have seen the Lord bless this, and we desire, yes, fruit for his glory. We desire souls for his honour. So if I can start with a verse of Scripture, it's Psalm 34 and verse 11. You may be familiar with it. Come, ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Come, ye children. Words of invitation. No point thinking you're going to have a Sunday school ministry and you'll be blessed with fruitfulness if you haven't got any children. So always try and remember various points beginning with the same letter. I think it's always a good scheme, especially if you're not quite sure of where you are and what you're doing. The first I want to mention is invite. We must invite, and we must invite in such a way that there is a response. Secondly, we must instruct. Ken Ham, who I must avoid saying one of your countrymen, but I know he now lives in this country, he has added something, I think, to the Answers in Genesis ministry, which is so helpful and we so identify with. He says, so much trouble amongst the rising generation comes from them having learnt Bible stories in Sunday school. The idea that the Bible contains stories, things made up, things which are not real and rooted in history and fact. And therefore, when an alternative worldview is taught as fact, it has quite an impression on the mind and on the heart of those who hear it. When I go along to church, when I go along to Sunday school, I hear about stories. When I go to my classroom or my science laboratory or whatever, I hear about facts. And therefore, we don't want to tell anyone that there are Bible stories to be taught and heard in Sunday school. We instruct, we invite, and we instruct. What do we instruct in? We instruct in the ways and the truth of the Lord, the gospel. Why do we do that? Because we believe that children are able and children will both understand and respond in faith and repentance to the gospel message. We make no apology for that. I remember when I was a youngster, a friend of mine went off to university. He was a dear friend, and he was doing psychology and sociology as his subject, and he came back after his first term and he said, children cannot understand the doctrine of atonement. We mustn't teach anything about atonement, about one person making things right, bringing together two at one, punishment having to be borne by another, as in the gospel, because children can't understand it. Well, what foolishness is that? And I think Pastor Waldrop would know Mrs. Masters as we do, and I think her testimony would be she came to the Lord significantly younger than the age of 10, let me just say, and she certainly understood. Children understand right and wrong and punishment, they understand forgiveness, and what wonderful concepts to set before the young. We instruct from the scripture. And then our third eye, or my third eye, is going to be intercede. You know, we don't take the view, well that certainly was the view that I was brought up with in Leicester. You may have heard of Leicester, right in the middle of England, 100 miles north of London, where there are a small number of enthusiasts who did Sunday school. The rest said, oh, we can't teach children, we can't gather children, they won't listen to us, they won't respect us, we can't speak the language, we can't communicate with such, and therefore let those who have particular gifts do Sunday school. We will watch, we'll be encouraged if there are encouragements, we'll perhaps try and support if there are discouragements, but we can't do it. And what we want to try and get across is that the whole church does Sunday school. Now, it doesn't mean that the whole church teaches the children, it doesn't mean that the whole church necessarily invite. So the inviting and the instruction can be done by others, but the third eye, interceding, can be done by us all. Now, we used to have an elderly lady, and she was lots of contacts with America. I suppose it's inevitable that we think this way. She was born in South America. Her husband was her father, was a very distinguished military man in the First World War. He went into the civil service in London, and he was retired in 1939 at the outbreak of the Second World War. And his daughter Phoebe was brought up in Chile. She went to university in North America. I think she went to a university in Boston, but I may be mistaken. And while she was there, she heard a little of the gospel from the Campus Crusade for Christ people. It had no effect on her, and the rest of her life, she was married twice, saw in the Lord's providence her come over to England, and finally arriving in the area around where we had set up in the local primary school, and she responded to invitations to come, and I believe in the Lord's mercy she was converted of the Lord, and she used to say to us, I wish I could do more. You're all so busy and I can do nothing. And I used to say to her, Phoebe, with great respect, you can do more than we can do. It's not a question of what you can't do, it's a question of what you can do. And she was for us a tremendous prayer warrior. She would say, what should I pray for? We would tell her. And so we would know that if we were visiting and inviting the children in, if we were instructing and facing the difficulties of children who didn't particularly want to listen, or they didn't want others to listen, we knew this. There was someone, rather as the holding up of Moses' arms in the fight against the Amalekites, there was someone who was bearing us up in intercessory prayer, that we would have blessing, that we would have opportunity, that we would see a stilling if there was a rebellious spirit in the classes, that we would have fruitfulness. So I'm going to speak very quickly now about invitation, about instruction, and about intercession. Now, I would like to turn you, only because it's a passage which has come alive, if that's the right word, since I heard two Chinese pastors, both Reformed Baptist pastors. They're busy in the United States actually translating the scriptures into Chinese and into Mandarin. It's coming from the original Masoretic Hebrew and received text, New Testament Greek. I'm part of on the committee of the Trinitarian Bible Society in London, and there are many translation projects in train. This is a project which is much needed and long overdue, and my wife and myself and many others, it's certainly on the internet, you can hear it, it's on the Trinitarian Bible Society website, but let me just say what I heard and learned for the first time from two Chinese pastors with a burden, and it was a burden. There was an Englishman there providing a translation, but if the Chinese pastors believed that they could convey in English, they would take no notice of the translator because they wanted to get this message across. It was a real burden to them. And in Luke chapter 5, perhaps I can just read the first 11 verses because this is so important. This is Luke chapter 5, verses 1 to 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake. For the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Amen. Now the point that our Chinese brethren wanted to make was there's one little letter in that passage which you'll only find in the authorized version,
yes,
or in those translations from what we would see as the best or the preserved, the divinely preserved text.
Yes.
And that is the little letter S.
Yes.
And there it is in verse 4, let down your nets for a draught. And what did Peter do? Well, we know what Peter did, because although he argues a little and expresses perhaps a measure of frustration, nevertheless, at the end of verse 5, I will let down the net. And of course it was the net that broke at the end of verse 6. What's the point here? Well, they're told, Peter is told to nets, not one net, nets plural. And what does he do? He lets down one net. Now we can understand Peter, we wouldn't criticise him at all. What would we have done? Toiled all night and caught nothing. He would have been very, very tired, probably frustrated, disappointed, resigned to having perhaps wasted an entire night. And here is someone who I'm sure Peter respected. He wasn't quite sure who he was at that stage, but Peter knew about fishing. Jesus didn't. And if Peter couldn't catch a fish all night, there was no way that Jesus would be able to tell him how to do his own job. And it almost comes across, doesn't it? Nevertheless, at thy word. If we have to go through this, what might seem a little bit like a charade, just to prove you wrong, just to show that we know best, okay, nevertheless, we'll do it. It's not what we would choose to do, it's not what we would advise anyone else to do, but out of deference to you, we'll do it. But we're not going to do it in quite the way you say. We'll just let down one net, because that's all we need to do. The other net, well, it can stay here, it's being repaired. We don't want to involve everyone in the work. They can carry on with their net mending. We'll just take one of our boats out and we'll cast down the one net. And of course, you can imagine Peter's surprise, the net break. Notice they have to call for the others. So there's a lesson here. The others come. The fish that were going to be spilling out of the net, they fill both boats and they bring both to the land. And what does Peter say? That's where Peter says, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." Now, if you don't have the difference between nets plural and nets single, so you have one of the plethora of modern English translations which take it as nets all the way through. Well, it wouldn't make any difference, it's just as net all the way through, but nets all the way through. You don't see a difference between Christ saying nets to be cast for a draught and Peter only putting down one. So you are compelled to see that what Peter was doing when he said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord," he was saying this: I didn't really believe that fish could be caught. I didn't really think that something could be accomplished when we toiled all night and failed nothing. Please forgive me for my unbelief. But if you see the point that our Chinese friends were making, Christ said nets, and I didn't do that. It's not that I didn't believe, putting words into Peter's mouth. I didn't obey. And because I didn't obey, and my disobedience was made transparently obvious to everyone, that's why I cry out, "Depart from me, for I am a man of unclean lips." I will say a lot, as we know, but there was a problem with obedience. And the Lord was teaching Peter and the others a lesson. We know that because he says to him, "From henceforth," at the end of verse 10, "thou shalt catch men." Peter is going to learn that catching men and catching fish, yes, many similarities, but there are some differences. And just as he couldn't catch a fish unless he obeyed and believed what Christ had said, so he wouldn't be catching any men either unless he obeyed and unless he believed what Christ said. Now I would like to apply that very quickly to children's work. In fact, children do grow up unless the Lord, if they're believing, take them to himself earlier. But, you know, a child saved, if we were going to look at things this way, what an investment that is. A child saved. Now, we're very blessed and very humbled that we do have those in our membership who were saved from homes where there was no church going or no belief. And you know, it's a wonderful thing to walk into a meeting and perhaps there's gathered there a dozen or 15 teenagers, whether they're boys or girls or both, or even more children, and the people who are speaking and who are doing the inviting, the instruction, they once sat in those very seats. You have a problem with discipline, or you have a problem with attention. What better than to have someone trying to teach and encourage the young who knows exactly what it's like to sit in those seats and who didn't want to listen and who was disruptive. But the Lord spoke and opened their hearts, and now they love the Lord and they have a real burden for those who sit in front of them. Those who can teach in a way that is full of feeling, of purpose and helpfulness. What a privilege that is. And so, as we come to Sunday school work, we say this. We don't say that Spurgeon, actually, I've just been shown a picture of Spurgeon, but Spurgeon, of course, said that if you see a man saved at the age of 70, by the time you've taught him how he should live and serve, he's called home. He essentially says the investment or the return on the investment isn't much. But if you see a child saved and you instruct them as a youngster in the ways of the Lord and train them to serve and speak for him and live for him, you've got a lifetime of service and possibility before you. You probably have heard of the one who, when he used to come in to teach his class, and that happens here in the school, but he would always take his hat off, it's rather like, or bowing a little to the children who were in front of him, because he didn't know. One of them might be a Luther, one of them might be a Spurgeon. What a privilege that would be, to be training up a youngster who would turn out to be a fisher of men himself or herself, and to be able to set someone serving the Lord for the rest of their lives. So we need to do things the Lord's way. So going back to come, ye children, hearken unto me, inviting. And we must invite in a way that is successful. Now that doesn't mean we start doing anything, it doesn't mean that the ends justify the means, but we must be successful. Now if I can, very briefly just mention our situation. We did start with Sunday school work, your pastor is absolutely correct. And what we did was we felt before the Lord, rather than going around saying we're going to start a Sunday school, come along, it's going to be great. We would start the Sunday school just with our own children, and then we could go around and say, there is a Sunday school in this area, why not come along? So we used to do door-to-door visitation, we used to meet in a local school. We deliberately started the work under the Lord's guidance in that school because it was the biggest primary, that's age 5 to 11. I do apologise if I insult your intelligence, but I'm not too good on this grade system. So anyway, age 5 to 11, over 700 children in that school. So we bought the house as near to the school as possible, and of course we had, I wouldn't say a captive audience, but we wanted to befriend those in the authorities in the school very quickly. In the Lord's goodness, I became a governor, and we had contact with the school. We went around the neighbourhood visiting, and children began to come. Recently, again, in the Lord's goodness, we have been able to buy an old building. It's a disused Methodist church which came on the market, and in this big old building we want to see children's work. Well, we're 25 years on from what we did before. So what we're doing now, and we only started in the summer, was we're going round. Yes, we are doing visiting, but we have cards, and we put cards all around the neighbourhood. We distribute calendars at Christmas with a card in. We went to see the local school, asked the head teacher if I could speak with her, shared what we wanted to do, and we have seen a number coming along. But there's a significant difference. We don't think the children will come along to Sunday school cold. Now, you may find fault with us, and that's absolutely fine. But what we've done is we've started a Thursday meeting. It's 6 o'clock meeting, 6 till 7:15. We now have 13 on the register. We left before the meeting on Thursday, so there were 9 there on Thursday. And what we hope to do, as they get to know us and we get to know them, we get to know the parents trust us, is start a Sunday school. June the 3rd is our targeted date, but anyway, we'll see how things work out. So we've done it completely differently. Not by bribing, not by doing anything that anyone would have an issue with, hopefully winning the support of the parents, but saying this: we must invite and we must see the children come. Now, the absolute essential of the children coming, of course, is that they want to come. How can you make children who have endless games and plenty of equipment and lots of reasons not to come along to Sunday school? Well, what you have to do, if you can say it ever so crudely, just to make the point, you have to make them like you. You have to make them love you. You love them with such a love that they love you in return. This sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? Isn't that what we see of the Lord? Why do we love him? Because he first loved us. There may be children, I don't know, in the neighbourhood here, certainly the 2 neighbourhoods where we draw children from, who don't see much love in their lives. In fact, they probably don't see any, if the truth be known. Such terribly sad sights. And the only relief, I suspect, from a very uncomfortable existence is when they're with us for an hour and a half on a Sunday or a Thursday, and they know that we want them to come. The parents know that we want them to come. That maybe the only adults who are nice to them from week to week are us. and therefore they want to come. Now, how do you convince someone that you like their presence, that you want them to be where you are? Well, we do that as adults, don't we? I'm sure we do it to one another as well. We want to prove that we're serious. We want parents to be supportive and sympathetic. So we do visit and encourage. We respond to questions. We have invitations. We give our phone numbers and addresses. We don't mind what it costs. And as soon as you've got a little nucleus, of course, they then become, well, we call it self-perpetuating. But they start doing the inviting. Now, perhaps just as I finish, I could mention numbers. I was very hesitant about numbers, but I did a little calculation last night. In our current membership, we have, well, we do have a number who came to the Lord through Sunday school work, but 4. Now, that's actually slightly over 20%. We're 19 members. 4 came from unchurched, unbelieving backgrounds and are absolutely the backbone of the work amongst children and young people. We at the moment have a Sunday school on Sunday afternoon. There were 29 there last Sunday afternoon. None of them are from Christian homes, and they're very, very regular. We have some teenagers in an afternoon Bible class. We had an outing for them on Saturday evening, last Saturday, and they came round to our home after they'd been out. I'm sure you have these things in America, they just seem bizarre to me, but massive numbers of trampolines and you just bounce up and down for an hour. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, and they came round to our house, so 11 of those present. And then on Thursday, we had the meeting I've mentioned at 6 o'clock. That's for children in the area of the church. I was so hoping we'd hit double figures on Thursday. As I say, a dozen on the register, and that's increasing. They're beginning to invite others. Then we have teenage girls. On Thursday, there were 9 teenage girls there. One from one of the families in the church, 8 unbelieving teenage girls. One of them brought a friend along, so we haven't met one of the girls who was there. And then on Friday night, we have a younger children's meeting in the school. Now, there wasn't a meeting last night because we weren't there. But the previous Friday, there were 50 children. Not one of those is from a believing home. 50 children in the school. And then we have a young teenagers meeting in the church. I don't know how many were there last night. I think we were told, have we? Only 5 last night. And then we have teenage boys, and there were 7 teenage boys there. So we're doing 5 meetings, Thursday and Friday, and then Sunday school and Bible class on the 2 locations. And if we can do that, and I don't mean this in a wrong sense, but you must be significantly more numerous than we are. There is almost no limit to what can be done. What do you do with people who say, but we can't go and talk to children, or we don't know what to say to them? Actually, if I can be very disloyal to my dear brother Chris Cooper, he used to say this to me. He said, I have to take a child home in my car. What do I say to him? How do you find things to talk to them about? And of course, it's not difficult if you sort of know the things that they're interested in. Now, I'm completely out of date. I know nothing about computer games. But I think if I wanted to have a platform for discussion and identification, I would need to find out about computer games. When I was a little younger, it was sport. So you would need to know whether it's boxing or the local football team or whatever it is that goes on around here. I won't say too much about baseball or what have you, but whatever it is, so you know, so you have a point of contact. You can speak with them, you can encourage them, you can correspond with them. Invitation, instruction, I've mentioned. There's a lovely word. It's now so old-fashioned that we couldn't even find it on Google this afternoon as we were just looking. It's there in Scripture. This is the older son in the parable of the prodigal son. Remember, younger son is home. My son was dead and is alive again. He's lost his found. Killed a fatted calf and there's great rejoicing. The elder son doesn't come in. He's staying outside. He's not responding to invitation. What happens? The father goes out And in Luke 15:28 we read this, and he, as the older brother, was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. Now we tend to use the word entreated him. What did his father do? Did he say, we'd like you to come in, take it or leave it? He would never have come in. What did his father do? He would have pleaded with him. He would have reasoned with him. Of course it's meet, it's right, it's appropriate for us to rejoice because your younger brother who's dead and he's alive again, he's lost and he's found. He entreats him. He, as it were, opens himself up. He gives reasons for coming. It's appropriate and right to come. And he gives every reason he can. And that's what we must do, isn't it? And therefore, in Sunday school, you have an annual summer outing. You have a winter party. We don't call it a Christmas party, but that's just us. We call it a winter party. We have it in January because people are far too busy in the run-up to December the 25th. So we have a winter party. We had 42 children in the winter party just a couple of Saturdays ago. And as well, we have a prize giving, prizes for attendance, good Christian literature. You can get into the home. And we also have an anniversary service. So you have 4 occasions when you can invite parents in to Sunday school. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm on the end of my allotted time, is there was one man, he's the only person who's ever said this to me. He said, you should not be teaching Sunday school. And I said, why is that? And he said, because you should wait till the children get older. He said, the children, they're in a home, there's no belief, there's no encouragement. They probably only hear the name of the Lord in cursing or blasphemy. And here you are. You bring them along into a church. You try and get them converted. And for an hour every week, they are in a good place. But then they go back into their homes. And they have to suffer for the rest of the week until the next hour. Wouldn't it be more sensible to convert them? So why not convert the parents? And then they can bring the children along, they can be converted. And I looked at him in sheer disbelief. And I said, but the Lord's instruction and command is preach the gospel to every creature. And having Mr. Spurgeon on the mind, because I know now his picture's just through there, of course it was Mr. Spurgeon who said, and children are included in whatever definition we may have of creature. Preach the gospel to every creature. And therefore, I'm afraid I had to say to our friend, we don't believe that we have to wait and see the parents converted so they'll bring in the children. We believe something can happen, that the children will come to the Lord and they will have the privilege of leading parents to the Lord. And perhaps I shouldn't say any more because I have said I've finished already, but my father was never a believer when I was young. He used to love Sunday school because he could take us and leave us for the afternoon and spend the afternoon doing what he wanted to. The morning was just as good. He took us off to church and then he could spend the morning doing what he wanted to. He got very concerned when my sister, my older sister, and then myself came to the Lord, was drawn to the Lord, blessed with spiritual sight and conversion at the age of 11. We wanted to go to the evening service in the church. He was very troubled by that. An authoritarian man. So he as a father rather than for him as a sinner, but this is how the Lord works. And so we will not believe we shouldn't be ministering to children. We will not believe that they can't bring as fishers of men in the best sense of the word, their own parents to the Lord. And we will continue until someone can show us in Scripture that we should not. One young lad, he used to work out, he said, you've distributed 5,000 invitations and you've got 3 people to come. What sort of return is that? What would a marketing strategist make of that? How inefficient, how wasteful. But if it's from one soul, remember the lost sheep, the lost coin, just for one, that'd be more than every effort repaid. And what a glory it'll be on that day to see young souls who were brought to the Lord through the service, through the establishment of Sunday schools. And may you be blessed. You have to keep going. You have to do a lot of things that perhaps you prefer not to do. It's not easy in our experience, but the Lord has blessed. And therefore, if nothing else, I believe that's perhaps what we can do. We can say, do this. Do try it. Do apply yourself to it. And the other advantages, of course, are very, very many indeed. But I think I've taken my time. Pastor, so I shall
It's up to you to take questions, and for you and perhaps for your wife as well.
Right, well, please, if anyone has any questions whatsoever, yes, Eddie, I must apologise, I don't know your name, but you have listened very, very well.
You mentioned that when you started,
yes,
it was with your own children in
yes,
the church.
Yes.
Can you expand on that a little?
Of course I can, yes. We were, as Pastor Waldrop says, we were at the Metropolitan Tabernacle. I suppose to cut a long story short, I had a strong burden from the Lord, a strong call to ministry. We were counselled by Dr. Masters that we shouldn't go anywhere where there was a good church already, because that would detract from that church's work. And the Metropolitan Tabernacle has a wonderful ministry of magazine work, the School of Theology already mentioned, and we soon came to the view that we needed to go to a place where there was no other good Bible-believing, gospel-preaching Reformed church. We came up with one or two suggestions. We went to see Dr. Masters and he said, you can't do any of that, because the pattern in the New Testament is that even when the apostle was in Athens, he was waiting for Silas and Timothy to come. He so showed the apostolic program was numbers. And Dr. Masters would mention many who had gone out as individuals. Now, I know this might be a little contentious, but anyway. And it would have been better if they had gone out in numbers. Well, in the Lord's remarkable, and it is a remarkable providential confirmation. Pastor Walter was just saying pastors could write books about this sort of thing. But in the congregation in London, there was a couple, and they had family in Plymouth. And when they used to go and visit family in Plymouth, there was no good church for them to go to. And so they had come before the Lord, and Dr. Masters knew this, to a position whereby if anyone else who was reformed, Bible-based, gospel preaching, started a church in Plymouth, they would go and support them. So when the Lord led us to see Plymouth as being the largest city in the UK where there wasn't such a church, when we shared with this couple what we were going to do, it was remarkable. And so we had 3 children, they had 3 children at the time. So we moved down to Plymouth, we arrived within a few months of each other, and we started meeting in our homes, and much prayer. And so when we were ready to start the very first Sunday school meeting on the 3rd of May 1992, we had 6 children. They were our children. Actually, we had 9 children, because news had leaked out what we were doing. So there were 2 sisters came along, and the younger of those 2 sisters, Alison, she is now a church member. And she and her sister came along because Mum thought something good was happening, so she wanted them to be there. We said, well, we'd rather you waited so we could tell everyone we'd started, and added to it. But anyway, they were there, and another girl as well. So is that, yes, so we started and then very quickly sought to add to it. Yes.
Thank you.
So 2-part question. When you started 25 years ago, right?
Yes.
When you started 25 years ago, what were some of the cultural differences that you encountered? So, for example, did you encounter a lot of Catholics there, or did you encounter a lot of Muslims or atheists? And the second part to that, how would you compare that to today's society? I don't know if you happen to have the same problems that we have here. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that.
Right. Well, first of all, I come from Leicester, and Leicester is an unusual city in the UK. It's unusual because the Afro-Caribbean, or the black community, is larger than in any other city in the country. So I'd love to tell how best man at our wedding was Dalton, black man, and I was best man at his wedding. I saw many, many black young men come to the Lord in the church in Leicester. We used to have a very, very faithful captain of the Boys Brigade. We had a Boys Brigade company, had a Boys Brigade, it's a sort of uniformed organisation for boys.
Boy Scouts kind of thing?
A bit like that, but with a firm sort of doctrinal basis.
Oh.
The advancement of Christ's kingdom among boys is its objective. And we used to, in the Boys Brigade company, we had a very good mix of all the communities. It was quite a rising Hindu community, not so many Muslims actually, and a strong Afro-Caribbean community, and of course a white community. And the city council used to send their community liaison officers in to see us every now and then on a Friday evening, because we were seeing something, this is back in the 1960s, that wasn't being seen in any of the council-run, council-supported community centres. Racial harmony, and this was the great objective. And the captain, very fair, he used to love this. He'd say, lads, we're in for a treat tonight. The council are coming to see what we're doing. And what he would do is he'd show what was happening, and he'd lead them off into a side room, and he'd give them the gospel. And he'd tell them the only way you will ever achieve true racial harmony is through the gospel. Nothing else removes that middle wall of partition. Christ, or you won't see that middle wall of partition removed. So we then went down to London, and in London, again, very large number of different ethnic groups, and the Sunday school at the Metropolitan Tabernacle, which is hundreds every week, the vast majority, there's 4 branches now as well as the main Sunday school. The latest branch is in Brixton, which perhaps even has a bit of a notoriety over here for the riots in the 1980s, and the Sunday school operating there. But the vast number of children and teenagers in the Sunday school there are black. So coming to Plymouth was, yes, you're absolutely completely different, because very few ethnic minorities in Plymouth. There's a small Turkish, Russian, quite a strong Vietnamese group, but predominantly white. So that was quite a challenge for us. But you know, I wouldn't want to in any way speak ill in any way, so please don't misunderstand me, but I had a conversation with Dr. Masters a couple of years ago and said, you know, I'm told there are more white children in our Sunday school than there are at the Metropolitan Tabernacle. And he said, that's absolutely right. The problem we have in England, I don't know if it's a problem here, is the group that seems so difficult to reach are white young men. I don't know why that is. Perhaps it is a cultural background, perhaps there's still a residue of a sort of a religious observance in the parental generation or the grandparental generation. So yes, that was a real challenge to us, dealing with apathy and perhaps materially a little better off perhaps in Plymouth. But I can still remember, I think in Plymouth, and it's why the Lord called us there, it's not that the gospel has been rejected by the parental generation. They just don't know it. It was a novelty value. It had literally dropped out of all cultural norms. And so we were bringing something new. So we had a big advantage that no one really knew what this was. Taking the Bible seriously. But there are big churches in Plymouth. What are you doing that they're not? And we said, well, we believe, yes, people need to be changed, not just gathered for a good time. And I think we got a lot of support because it was something new. Where the church building is that we've moved to, it's a far wealthier community. It's only about 15 minutes walk away, but it's a different district of Plymouth, and therefore we're conscious that where the Sunday school is in the school, we have a strong factor of parents just wanting to offload their children in the afternoon, just to get some peace and quiet. It's a far more middle class area where the building is, and that isn't the case really. It's exactly the opposite. The parents are very reluctant to part with their children. They suspect that if people say they're religious, that they're probably dangerous, and there's so many safeguarding issues around. And sadly, with the scandals in the Roman Catholic Church especially, but not confined to the Roman Catholics, then people are very reluctant to let their children be in the company of religious people. But I think, yes, and I don't know your community, and it's a good thing I don't, because if I was going to try and say what you should do is this, I don't expect you to listen to me. So I think I mentioned we walked actually to the church yesterday morning, and we came past a rather big school that's down there. Now our eyes would light up at the prospect of a school like that. I don't know anything about the school at all, but there are children there. And I think Helen actually asked this afternoon if there had been any contact with that school. I think if I can just share one thing that happened, the school that I visited, the head teacher of and said we want to start a Sunday school. She never got back to me, I haven't heard from her since, and she's done nothing to support us. But the Lord sent to us a little lad. He was there on Thursday night, Johnny. And Johnny's mum was so taken with what we were doing. I don't think she really understands what we're doing, but we're providing something for the children after school. So she said, I'm going to take your invitation card and I'm going to put it on the parents' Facebook page for the school. So we don't have to distribute our invitation card to the children or to the parents, because they all see it every time they go on the Facebook page to complain about some feature of the school. So the internet wasn't there for us really in 25 years ago, but it is now. And again, contact with youngsters. It's not just the audience that's changed, but the means of communication. I think it's just the local the only people who know the local psychology around here are you. We don't. All we believe is that the promise that there will be fruitfulness is indiscriminate, or is not dependent on the culture or on the particular difficulties.
Right.
It is a question really of whether we will do what the Lord calls us to do. And if Peter can toil all night and catch nothing, then I think we're going to have to toil all night and probably not catch anything if we're not doing it the way we should be doing it. But the promise, I think, is as soon as he obeyed Christ, the net break. That's remarkable, isn't it? You know, we had it, if I can, please forgive me. We had an elderly man who started coming to our evening services. We started evening gospel services, and he came along. Dear man, now with the Lord, I believe. And after 3 months, just 3 months, he said, Richard, they're not coming in, are they? And I said, Fred, give us 10 years. 10 years minimum. Can't possibly say they're not coming in. And he came up to me again and he said, you know what Confucius says? And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, Confucius says the customer is he who returns, not he who comes. Not many returning, are there? I said, well, again, let's give it 10 years. 10 years. Now, some people would try and work, and after 6 months, they'd say, we've toiled 6 months and caught nothing. I think if we toiled 10 years and catch nothing, then perhaps we do need to say to ourselves, there's something radically wrong here. But 3 months, 6 months, always remember dear William Carey now out in India, not a single convert for 6 years. But goodness me, after Krishna Pal came to the Lord, and the floodgates began to open. So we mustn't give up. We must encourage one another. And there may be particular difficulties, which then obviously we need to deal with. But I can't tell you what the difficulties are, and I'm glad I can't. But I'm sure you've got plenty. Is that helpful? Good. Thank you. Very good. Well, shall I say a little bit more, can I? The model that we used to some effect in London was that you would have a Sunday school, and that would meet on the Lord's Day afternoon, Sunday afternoon, but then you would support it with a weeknight meeting. As a bit like a weeknight activity meeting. So you would have snooker tables or football tables or various crafts and what have you, and perhaps a few other things, and you would have a subject or a term, topic or a theme. So you would have a devotional talk or an epilogue, and this would be an evening for an hour and a half, say. And if the children came to Sunday school, then they could come to the Friday evening meeting. And that's the model that Dr. Marsis and Metropolitan Tabernacle still use. It wasn't a model that suited us well at all. But the weeknight meeting is tremendously helpful from a recruiting point of view, as I mentioned with what we're trying to do at the moment, where the church building is. So we're using the Thursday meeting to get the children along, to establish with what are now significantly more suspicious parents than there were 25 years ago, to see that we're not up to no good, but we are normal, outgoing, friendly, concerned people who like to see their children come along, and their children can be safely left with us. And that weeknight meeting then provides, if you like, a stepping stone or a platform into Sunday school. Now, I couldn't possibly say what would be the most appropriate thing to do here. I just don't know. But if children would come to a weeknight meeting, and you could, in that weeknight meeting, see them have a respect, it's not easy, but to have a respect for that 15-minute devotional time. And you can then lead on, as we're striving to do, so I can't say we've done this, but it's what we hope and pray will happen. They will then be so moved, and of course in answer to much intercessory and earnest prayer, to come along on Sunday afternoon as well. So a parent who a year ago would say, send my child to a Sunday school to hear lessons from the Bible. You must be joking. Who are you people? Will now say, well, I've seen what you're doing on a Thursday night. I see that you're not dangerous. I see that you're not enemies of modern culture and education. I see that you actually are concerned for my child. And actually, I'm very interested as well. So they will let their children come along on Sunday afternoon. That's what we hope will happen. Now, that may be a good model, it may not be. And I think we would say we would try anything, not at variance with Scripture, not using bribery. There's a person who used to give children money to come along to Sunday school. Well, absolute waste of time and waste of money. No success at all, because we're dependent on the Lord, not on the ingenuity of what we may or may not come up with. But, so the weeknight meeting, and we highly value the weeknight meeting. Some of those, a small number who have come to the Lord, they got to the age of 11 and 12, they began to hear things at secondary school, and they stopped coming on Sunday. But they kept coming to the girls' Thursday night meeting or the boys' Friday night meeting. We arranged a trip away to Wales. It's our 22nd year we've done this in January for teenagers. They have to be teenagers, taken away from Monday to Saturday, and the Wales Week features in the testimony of nearly all of those I've mentioned. A wonderful opportunity. But yes, in as children, then you really have to battle to keep them, and then in the Lord's mercy, some of them will be saved. Anything else we can say? Alan, is there anything else we need to say? Sorry.
That's okay. On the Thursday meetings,
Yes.
is it also treated kind of without, how do I word this? What do you do on the Thursday meetings?
On the Thursday meeting, these are children 7 to 11, and what we do is we, in the building we have, it's a marvellous old Methodist building. They built a school hall, they called it, on the back of the building in 1929. The church was built in 1905, but in 1929 they built a 2-story schoolroom on the back. So we have a big hall downstairs, and they come into that big hall, and we have two goals and a little football area, and then we have various games. I'm sure you have the same things, because some games seem to be universally acceptable. And we have a pool table, a snooker table. And then upstairs, after about 15 minutes, they go up to an activity. And we always do an activity which either can be taken home or eaten, or both. So they do the activity, you'd have to get Helen to tell you about activities. It's not my department at all. I just marvel that they can come up with something every week, and it's different from last week. And then we have a tuck shop where they can spend money if they like. They can have a biscuit and a drink of juice and what have you. And then we have the talk. And the talk is about 15-20 minutes. Our series this term, it's from the Metropolitan Tabernacle again. They have excellent materials. Their term topic is why believe in God. Now, they wouldn't mind, but we're not over keen on that. What we have made the topic is why I should believe in God. So we make it more imperative rather than sort of an optional discussion. And a reason, because he made me, is the first talk. The second talk is because I have a conscience that demands I believe in God. And then various other things, what's this on Thursday?
Creation.
Because of the evidence all around me in creation. We're an excellent planetarium this afternoon, and this bore testimony to the ignorance that's in culture around us. You know, our son works in engineering, and he tells me there's an awful lot of people who are very, very highly educated in science and engineering. They don't believe the Big Bang. They know it has no credence whatsoever, but they will not and cannot believe in a creator God, and so they're just open to anything, whether it's aliens or whatever it may be. Well, it seems to me that absolutely the youngsters are so receptive to, Pastor calls it cause and effect. We would say everything has a beginning, whether it's you, me, the chair, this building, and therefore to think that things just came about without someone who designed the chair or designed us. And the children seem very receptive. So that's our term topic. After that, we usually, again, the balls for 5-10 minutes, and the parents usually arrive early. And we've a little lad called Logan. I'll tell you about little Logan. He's so keen that when it's time to go home, he starts crying. And I have this mental picture of him just before Christmas, holding on for dear life to the radiator. Mum was the other side, tugging. Logan was bawling his eyes out. He didn't want to go home. He never wants to go home. And Mum sent me a wonderful little email at Christmas. She said, "Thank you so much for your group. Logan loves it so much. Thank you." So I do believe that Logan will start coming when we start Sunday school. I do believe Mum will have a completely different view of those religious zealots that's brought that building. She'll think we're reasonable people, and who knows. I hope that she'll come to some of the meetings Thursday. As they get older, the teenagers, of course we do teenage things, I suppose. Just give the boys a football, but girls, yes. They're not going to be running around, especially if they've made themselves up for the evening. So they're a lot more hard work. They are hard work. But you'd have to talk to Helen about the girls.
You'll have other opportunities for Q&A. Let's go to the Lord in prayer now and ask God's blessing for the food, shall we? We'll go next door, Father.